Hello guys. I am a medical student with a particular interest in psychiatry and psychology. This is my first video and I'm very excited to talk to you about a book on psychoanalytic theory written by the recognized Lacanian scholar Bruce Fink. The book is called The Lacanian Subject and it is a conspicuous introductory work on Lacan's ideas. For those not yet familiar with Lacan, he was a French psychoanalyst who built on Freud's theories and mixed them with structuralist philosophical thought. He was active from the 1940s through the 80s. Most of today's active psychoanalysts are Lacanians, so he's a quite renowned figure. My video today is about the main ideas yielded in Chapter 2, with the title, The Nature of Unconscious Thought. I found the content particularly interesting and illustrative of how Lacan saw some processes of the unconscious. In the chapter, a small range of ideas are presented. We will start by mentioning them, in short, for the sake of acquaintance, before continuing by further discussing them. 1. The conscious and unconscious thought processes are separate and go in parallel with one another. The former might influence the latter during a conversation, but many times that won't be the case. 2. The unconscious is structured like a language. It has syntax and rules by which it abides. The unconscious cannot forget the past. Everything is remembered in it, as the contents will be part of a symbolic chain of signifiers. In short, the unconscious knows and remembers an event even though the individual himself cannot actively recall that same event, recallable past events. The chapter takes off by shedding new light on Freudian slips, whereas the popular opinion sees those as revealing of a repressed wish. They are here taken as an example to illustrate the differences between the conscious and unconscious thought processes. A good example would be in a conversation where a person should have said the word blister in a specific context, e.g., training injury, but he has a slip of the tongue and the word sister is uttered instead. It could mean that something in the conversation triggered thoughts of a sister, but might as well mean that thoughts of a sister were already brewing under the surface, regardless of the conversation. Thus, it is independent of what is going on in the conscious mind simultaneously. So we might conclude that two lines of processes are taking place within us concurrently: speaking and unconscious thought. One might ask a natural question here: how does language in the unconscious work? In short, the answer isn't straightforward. The linguistic contents within are constellated in chains. They interconnect and refer to each other. Those are called signifiers. They are words or fragments of words which are not fixed in a one-to-one relationship to a signified, but are instead connected and referring to each other. As signifiers are constellated together, they form a symbolic matrix that abides by syntax like that in a language. Very central to this thesis is that it is the formation into a matrix that gives rise to syntax, not the quality of the signifiers in of themselves. Bruce Fink presents a numerical example to illustrate how the unconscious abides by syntax, and I will do my best to show it shortly while staying faithful to the original. Imagine now a coin tossing game. In every toss, we can get either heads or tails with a 50% probability for each side. And the previous result doesn't influence the outcome we get in the new one. The result is always random and non-predetermined, which is quite straightforward for a coin toss. Consider now, also, a ciphering system where heads are assigned the plus sign and tails the minus sign. We will do a series of tosses and pair up every result with the one right before it. We can call this a symbolic system. In this system, there are three possible pairs: double pluses, alternating signs, and double minuses. First, we get a plus, and then we throw again. We get another plus, and now we can have the first pair. which falls into category 1. The third task gives a minus, category 2, the most interesting. And another, it's a minus, category 3. And so, another plus, now a category 2, and lastly, a plus. Double pluses now, counted with the one before it, a category 1 again, to end the series with. An interesting thing revealed when examining our trial is that even though any real coin toss is independent with a 50% possibility of either a plus or a minus, that same freedom and unpredictability does not apply to the symbolic categories. For example, toss number 3 could potentially have been a plus or a minus, but it would be impossible for it to produce a category 3 in the symbolic system. Its categories are restricted by the previous result to 1 or 2 exclusively. So, the symbolic system created around the tosses imposed rules and syntax that the individual results of the tosses by themselves know nothing of. It created impossibilities in a way that simply wasn't there before. Those findings are comparable to language syntax, in that words must be in a particular order or belong to a context for them to make sense at all. Also, another interesting thing revealed is that after a category 1 got interrupted by category 2, as seen in task number 3, it became possible for a category 1 to appear again only after an even number of category 2 is registered in the symbolic system. It can be seen in the display table, and it will generally be the rule. We can show another example below, just for the sake of it. As you can see, an even number of category 2 had to be registered within the symbolic system before category 1 could appear again. So the symbolic system remembers or keeps track of its previous components in a way that the toss results themselves do not. This feature of remembrance is illustrative of how the unconscious cannot forget, even when the individual himself cannot actively recall. There is no need to remember the past actively for it to influence you. As Lacan says in Écrit, such as the case of the man who retreats to an island to forget what? He has forgotten. Such is the case of a minister who, by not using the word, winds up forgetting it. But the letter, no more than the neurotic's unconscious, does not forget him. The connection between the line of thought here and Freudian repression is clear. Repressed material isn't effectively hidden away under the surface. It has not magically disappeared. The signifier lays there and causes discourse from wherever it's hidden. It connects to other signifiers, causes symptoms, or gives rise to symbolic substitutions in consciousness. Now we're heading towards the end of the video, and as we do it, we will take an example of why this is a matter of importance. The unconscious material, connections, or signifiers can be quite uncanny. They form our behavior and desires while being unknown to us at the same time. Let's take an ordinary, almost vulgar example where our pacifist friend has a fallout with his boss at work, which we can call Event A. When we talk to our friend soon thereafter, he justifies his behavior by saying that his boss was unfair. This is an ad hoc rationalization, which we can call Event B. But then later in the conversation, our friends revealed C. He couldn't take criticism in this context because he couldn't care less about his current task at work. A fact he was deliberately ignoring. A couple of months later, our friend realizes D when he is talking to his psychologist, that his boss's choice of words resembles that of his father, whom he has always been on bad terms with, and that must have made him extra sensitive and vulnerable to criticism from his boss. As you can see, our friend couldn't immediately recognize reasons C and D, They were recognized after the initial conflict, even though they might have given rise to it to begin with.